And welcome to the 2023 SB Untapped Zeroing Methane Emissions Datathon. We've made it. Congratulations. You were relieved to finish. Me and the organizing team equally pleased to get to this point and be here to celebrate what you've been doing over the past couple of months, learning, meeting people, learning about methane emissions, hopefully, learning about data science. Hopefully you've had a good time. I'm David Shackleton, one of the organizers, and I'd like to acknowledge that these lands are home to the Stoney Nakoda nations of the Wesley, Chiniki, Bearspaw, 3 nations of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Piikani, Kainai, and Siksika, and the Tsuut'ina of the Dene people. Treaty 7 territory is also shared with the Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3. We acknowledge the past, present, and future generations of these nations who help us steward this land, as well as honor and celebrate this place. We probably don't need a reminder, but here's a graph we're familiar with. Probably this graph goes back 1,000 years and shows the methane concentration in the atmosphere, going it from about 600, 700 pre-industrial times, fairly level, increasing to about triple that today. I think this is one reason why we're here, talking about stewarding our lands. It's a land that we share with the rest of the globe, and I think we're here and learning what we can do about it, how we can fix this problem this decade. It's a major problem for our industry, major problem for our planet. Our industry, oil and gas, plays a big part in this problem, and hopefully looking around us in this experience, we're playing a big part in solving the problem too. And if you go back a little further, you may see a different version of this chart going back about almost 1 million years. I saw one going back 800,000 years, and this line at the end, it appears completely vertical. It's very scary.
The energy industry is under growing pressure to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions. Operators are taking action by implementing a variety of technologies to detect and monitor emissions, including satellites, drones, handheld OGI cameras, and continuous monitoring devices. Continuous monitoring is uniquely suited to help operators reduce emissions. It's always on and always tracking, 365 days a year, providing a number of benefits to operators, including the immediate detection of emissions when they occur, improved tracking of leaks over time, and better cost effectiveness. At Cube, we aim to be the industry's most cost-effective continuous monitoring technology provider. We combine on-site devices, powerful AI, and informative analytical dashboards into a complete solution for detecting, quantifying, and managing emissions. Each Cube device can detect a variety of gases, including methane, sulfur dioxide, nitrogen dioxide, carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, and volatile organic compounds. Anemometers on each device assess the localization impact of wind over time, resulting in more accurate quantification and localization of emissions. LTE communication ensures that data can be transmitted continuously from most locations, while modern edge computing optimizes data granularity, which helps to lower both power and data transmission costs. Cube Axon devices can be set up in less than 30 minutes and are designed for deployment in extreme environments. They are solar-powered with rechargeable backup batteries capable of running each device for up to 2 weeks without any light at all. Cube Axons are placed purposefully around your operating site to ensure that sufficient data is captured around high-risk equipment with as few devices as possible. Cube's algorithms quantify detected emissions and attribute emissions rates and volumes to sources on site. The physics-guided artificial intelligence infers the quantity, location, and classification of each leak, helping you to determine which ones to prioritize for repair. Cube's high-fidelity data models and inferences are all visually summarized in cloud-based dashboards, available for real-time emissions monitoring, maintenance planning, and regulatory compliance reporting. CUBE Technologies offers the industry's most cost-effective solution for emissions reduction through continuous monitoring. Learn how other operators are managing their emissions at www.cubeiot.com.
There are significantly more emission from source with inactive flare. Background removal attempts were made, but with mixed results. Require using two different sensors, ANG at first, then GAO. Following this, our key recommendation is to focus on monitoring.
Started by taking a look at the Permian Basin and other sources from the US. Looking at this, we decided that there are different sectors. There is animal, coal, oil, and shell. As we expect this distribution of emissions to be representative in other countries as well, we thought that geomembranes might be a good alternative to the dry sludge that they bring.
We see that the world has never reduced its primary consumption, whether it's oil, gas.
This challenge, we used a data set for the Permian Basin for the year 2019 to for fund source classification. We used a Resonant 50 architecture.
The solution is the rapid plume evaluation model that we talked about earlier, specifically applied to completion sites.
There's mostly the governments, businesses, NGO. The location of data that are provided by the organizer is from 0 to 1,500, and we apply a case study which is the 20 images.
Attribution of methane emission to specific sources can be a challenging task, demanding high precision. Effective flaring destroys an average of 91.1% of methane, but unlit flare.
Top right, you can see the pooling layer, and this pooling layer is able to go across the image. This model would then be the backbone of a mobile app that would automatically send alerts to users with high emissions detected.
It traps heat in our atmosphere and has a global warming potential of 28 times that of carbon dioxide. The data provided is accompanied by quantified emission rates, source types, and locations. The graph shows the results for predicted rates versus actual rates, where a perfect model will result in a straight line. Global methane emissions from the energy sector are underreported by as much as 70%.
From this box plot, we can see that most significant methane source is the mining coal. While we were able to isolate some of the plumes in the images, we found that the model detected the plume detection. We employ a CNN detection model to isolate the plumes from the images. Problem: this algorithm will optimize flight paths based on the various feature variables such as emission rates of the source.
Most of the emissions are within the 1,500 kilogram per hour range. These numbers jumping out at us because they're so large, but they are started by feeding the original raw images straight into our machine learning algorithm. The prediction value is quite high, and on the right you see that the plumes are much smaller and the prediction values are correspondingly.
Various technologies are available for methane detection, including optical image. It is noteworthy that coal was the most significant contributor to intensive methane
sets for very specific tasks, such as the one that we are dealing with which has basically no impact on a company's cash flow. So this will make this venture very profitable business proposition.
Well, hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Tim. I'm one of the volunteer organizers for this event, and it's so delightful to be able to join you all, even if it's just in spirit, to celebrate your experience here. I am sad that I can't join you in person. I had an unfortunate encounter with a patch of ice a couple of weeks ago under some fresh fallen snow. And then that has resulted in me needing to get some emergency knee surgery. But I absolutely am so happy to have been part of this journey with many of you and to be able to come together tonight to just celebrate all that you have done. And hopefully what you've just seen in the montage of submissions highlights to you the incredible journey of growth and transformation that you have been on. And as we move on to the next slide, it's unbelievable to think that this journey for many of us started at the end of January. January 24th is actually when we first had our kickoff. And here we find ourselves now tonight on March the 7th. So in the span of over a month, many of you have had quite a journey. And to be quite honest with you, like for less than what it costs for what would be considered today, by today's standards, a cheap date, there's so much that you were able to gain from this particular experience. And so I'd like to just spend a few moments just to maybe highlight to you, maybe remind to you, maybe even help to show just the journey of transformation that you have been on. And I don't know if many of you, as you see this picture of the butterfly on the screen here, know the process by which a butterfly needs to go through to become a butterfly. I think many times our children's storybooks will remind us that they start off as caterpillars, they eat a bunch of food, and then they just transform magically into a butterfly. But in reality, what ends up happening is when they go through that process of forming themselves into a cocoon, there's actually this whole process of where they decompose and they break down all of their essential components, and it gets resynthesized into a much better version of themselves. But in order to get there, it means that they have gone through probably what is one of the most painful experiences in their life experiences, also that they can get to a better version of themselves. And so when we think about some of the experiences that you've had to go through, maybe you can see some analogies in this over the last few weeks here. Not only did you get to learn about a problem that the world is facing and how it is that we can better describe what that problem is, but you had the opportunity to actually use real industry data sets and to be able to apply practical data science in order to try to better understand the problem and then hopefully to come up with new insights about this problem. Not only that, but we forced you into teams, and some of you were meeting teammates for the very first time to go on this particular journey. And so elements of collaboration and teamwork and even project management became real tools that you had to use for this experience. Not only that, but then you got to see the power of data in action, where it wasn't only about understanding the data, but it was actually applying practices of analytics, machine learning, and even data storytelling in order to be able to get to the end result here. And then finally, as we've just seen, you are telling that story in the form of a video submission for your team that represents what your team's collective thoughts are. You participated in a quantitative competition to try to prove out some of your machine learning skills. And so through that, you may have stretched and expanded in many ways that you had not thought of before. So I just wanted to congratulate everyone for having gone on that journey of transformation. On top of that, hopefully you found that there were some really neat features that you were able to take away from this experience that are yours to keep. A big part of that is knowledge, just being able to expand your knowledge base, to learn more than what you knew yesterday so that you can be a stronger person today is a fabulous experience to have. And hopefully you made some friends. There were many opportunities to make friends virtually through our Slack channel, or even in person through a couple of hangouts that we had at Hudson's Pub. I know I made a lot of new friends through this, and I'm so grateful for that. And then you picked up some tech as well, too. So all the participants have been given a personal digital wallet built on blockchain technology. Great way to retain some of the digital credentials, some of which you've gained during this experience through the bootcamps. And then now you have a digital memento of this experience for you. And then, of course, part of why it is that we do things is because we want to be recognized or feel like we are contributing to something that is bigger than ourselves. And yeah, so certainly we'll have the opportunity to hear about some of the judging and the judging remarks. But at the end of the day, I think all of you should be very proud that you came together and you put together something that didn't exist before. And that is all the reason for celebration. So on the next slide, we just have a bit of a reminder of some of the events that had happened and some of the dates. You'll see that, again, we kicked off on the 24th. We had also the opportunity to have some of our sessions in some really beautiful places. So a great thank you to SLB and making their headquarters available to us for a number of our sessions. There were a number of boot camps as well as mini courses on deep learning that as a participant, you were able to participate in. We had keynote presentations. You're going to hear another spectacular keynote presentation tonight from Ian. And all of these just represent windows and glimpses into wealth of knowledge and experience that you can tap into. And then, of course, our Hangouts. One thing that I did learn by joining some of you in these Hangouts is you're a pretty tame crowd. Despite having access to the free flow of beverage, many of you are very, very subtle and very, very professional that way. So that really stuck out to me. And then, of course, here we find ourselves tonight at the closing ceremony at the Petroleum Club. What a beautiful place, very appropriate place to mark the end of such a wonderful event and experience. So again, just so delighted that all of you have completed this journey of transformation. Congratulations. And of course, none of this would be possible had it not been for the wonderful and amazing support of our partners and sponsors. And so maybe with that, I'll pass it over to Dylan to say a word of thanks to our sponsors.
So this is actually my first time helping out with this 6-week event. And I've come to learn that this event doesn't happen without support. As you know, there were a lot of sessions you guys attended. We're having food right now. Try to think of these names when you take a bite of that delicious food. Usually my meal at night is the leftovers from my kids' food. So I'm pretty grateful. But honestly, these sponsors that have been great partners. Many of them are here tonight. Many of them attended throughout the event. We're really interested in your feedback after this event's finished to see how you think things went and how we can possibly do better next year. Okay, so I'm going to introduce our keynote for tonight. Many of you may be familiar with Ian McGregor and some of the projects that he's worked on throughout the years. What surprises me about Ian is for someone who's done some pretty fantastic projects and has done a lot for Alberta, he's a pretty humble guy considering all that. And I was trying to think of, I wonder, how can someone who's done so much be so humble? And I thought he's probably all the problems that he's run into doing the projects like you guys run into, anyone runs into when they take a big risk and they tackle a problem that they know they have the skills to do, but there's a lot that's unfamiliar and a lot of unforeseen things. So that's my going theory, and you can correct me if it's right or wrong after this. But to give a little bit of an example of Ian's humbleness is that I once approached Ian and said was starting a business and wanted to get some advice and said, I come to you because you've done all these things, all these great projects. And he said, oh yeah, businesses, I've done a few of those. So here's just a few of those things. So Ian is the founder of Northwest Capital Partners, founder and CEO of Northwest Refining. If you don't know those names, you probably heard of the Sturgeon Refinery near Edmonton. That's part of the biggest carbon capture and storage network in the world, I believe, still. That connects with the Alberta Carbon Trunk Line, which Ian was instrumental in that. And then also, Ian was chairman of Enhance Energy. Enhance now being one of the companies operating what's going to be one of the biggest storage hubs probably in North America, if not the world. That's the Origins project. So Ian, I think, knew about emissions before they were cool, to use that term. He's also founder of the Canadian Museum of Making, which is a collection of mechanical wonders. I've never been there, but I've heard it's fantastic. Ian has quite an interest in mechanics, being a mechanical engineer.
So I'm Ian. I'm the oldest guy in the room. I used to be sitting there. I'm really interested in data science. A lot of the things that we're looking at now are involved in machine learning and data science and artificial intelligence. We think that's the future of the place. One of the reasons I believe that is that there's lots of old guys like me, and there's lots of stuff stored up in our heads, but a lot of that's being lost now, and so it has to be transferred in some way. And I believe that the machines are going to take over a lot of the jobs. So, So I run an outfit called Northwest Capital. What we do is we've been lucky and collected up some money along the way, so we're able to invest in ideas now. And one of the reasons I like to come to places like this and talk is I always think there's going to be a bunch of entrepreneurs in the room. Maybe someone will send me an email with an idea for a business, and we'll look and think about anything. We don't really care what it is. We're agnostic, except we want good ideas in the hands of good people. So that's my job. I try and do things that other people say are difficult to do or maybe impossible. And sometimes I call it's like we work on if the earth was flat, we work right on the edge. We never fall over, but we're getting pretty close sometimes. So my family's been here forever. That's my great grandfather, and that's Turner Valley. So that's back in 1914. So he worked in the oil field then, and all the rest of us always worked in the oil field somehow. That's my dad. He worked in a machine shop, and he used to take me to work on Saturday mornings with him. So after 10 years of doing that, I could run all the machines in the place. And so that was sort of like the shop we were in. So I'm in university. I'm going to grad school. I was sitting around the grad student's office one day, and a guy that looks like that comes in, and he wants somebody to build a machine. So he's talking to the secretary, and I'm listening to this and thinking I could do that. So I go over and talk to him, and I get a job to build a machine. That's the thing he wanted to build. So I decided I could do that. So there's no picture there, but I rented a double garage, and my dad lent me all the money he had in the world, which is $2,500, and I bought a lathe and a milling machine and started building the machine. So that's what the machine looked like, and it didn't work very good, but got me started. So the machine shop grew, and we built really anything that's used in the oil field. We built it, so I know how to build it. Anything that from a drilling rig to an oil refinery, I know how to do it. And we essentially sold that business and started over buying small. This was back in the time when the big guys were starting to sell reserves, and there was no process. So they had all these crappy oil reserves that they would sell. So we started buying them, and then we put small gas plants on them. So we knew, because of the welding shop experience, we knew how to build gas plants cheap, and we could buy these sort of gassy oil reserves and make some money at it. So we sold that business, and we bought that thing. That's a Taylor Straddle plant. So it was the 4th largest plant in Canada when we bought it. And it was run by Petro-Canada and West Coast, and they didn't get along. So the plant didn't run well. So we took it over and ran it. We connected it into the Edmonton ethane system and essentially got the ethane going to Edmonton. So when we bought it, it was about 7,000 barrels a day, and when we sold it, it was about 60,000 barrels a day. So it was a good experience. And then after that, I worked on this thing. This is my offshore drilling experience. So we built machinery that worked on this rig, and we would charter the rig and go out and drill a special kind of hole. And we that's a caisson. So we could drill this really big 25-foot diameter hole and put that caisson in the ground, and that would protect the wellhead. So you put the wellhead down on the bottom of it, and then if something came scraping along the top, it wouldn't bother the wellhead. And we did a lot of those, bunch of them up in the Arctic and a few off the East Coast. That's what a caisson looks like. So it's a big thing. And then after that, I knew something about offshore drilling, so I bought that thing. It was the world's largest deep water semi when we bought it, and it was in Pascagoula, and the guys building it went broke. And so we bought it out of there and moved it up to Halifax, completed construction, formed a new drilling contractor, and drilled off the East Coast for a couple of years. That's a 10-meter wave on there, so it gives you kind of an idea how big the thing is. It was a big machine. And after that, I bought an interest in the Weyburn CO2 flood. So I bought 11% of that. And that was before CO2 went in the ground there. So we learned a lot about CO2, because we were there all the way through building the pipe and putting the compressor in and actually getting the CO2 going in the ground. That's turned out to be a really successful EOR project. And the numbers there are, when it's finished, there's been about 35 million tons of CO2 going in the ground there. And I think they've got about 100 million barrels of oil out of the thing. That's where the CO2 comes from. It's a gasification plant down in Beulah, North Dakota. And so the gasifier is a really important element of CO2 sequestration or EOR both, because the costs of cleaning up the CO2 are the most expensive part of the whole process. And so if it comes from a gasifier, it's very high purity and it's clean when you get it. So I sold that thing off, and then I got the idea. I was sitting around, I retired for a little bit of time. I don't like being retired, but every now and then I do it. So anyway, I was sitting around thinking, well, what could you do next? And so I got the idea, geez, there's a lot of oil in Alberta. It's all bitumen, it's all ugly stuff. And bitumen has three problems. It's not worth very much because of the differentials. That's not true today, but it didn't used to be worth very much. Really high CO2, so bitumen's way worse than anything else from the CO2 viewpoint. And we're selling it all to one market because all the heavy refining is somewhere else. So I got the idea, why don't we build an oil refinery? And I thought, because of my Weyburn experience, I wanted to build a refinery to capture the CO2 in the process. And I decided that you shouldn't be building a refinery today unless you did something with CO2, because it's really an intensive process. And so I decided we start a company called Enhance to do the CO2 EOR stuff. So that's a flow sheet for the refinery. When you build it, it looks like that. We spent about 50 million man hours in the field and about 25 million man hours in the shops when we were building it. It looks like that now. So, it's a good thing, it works well, and it's doing what it's supposed to be doing. We had a lot of trouble with it when we were doing it. So a lot of pieces didn't work. And everybody took that opportunity to make fun of me in the newspaper. So this went on for a couple of years. They're saying I'm a real bad guy and the thing will never work. And, so if you're in the entrepreneurial space, just get used to people telling you that the stuff you're doing doesn't make sense. Just ignore it. Turn your hearing aid down. So this summer they announced how well it was doing. Strangely, all those guys that were making fun of me before don't show up anymore. I don't know what happened there, but anyway, that's me having a drink. So I'll talk about CO2 sequestration a little bit. Enhance does that. So inside our refinery, we have the world's largest blue hydrogen plant. We didn't know that when we built it. We just thought we're building a hydrogen plant and we need to capture the CO2. And then people started calling them blue hydrogen plants. So we do too now. It makes about 150 million standard cubic feet of hydrogen a day. And we capture about 4,000 tons a day of CO2 out of it. So decent quantity. So this is what I was talking about with CO2 purity. So the Shell Quest project is on the left there. And the red bars are what it costs you to clean up to get 100% purity of CO2. And you can't move it unless it's a dense phase, which is like a liquid. So you have to compress the CO2. And if there's any nitrogen in it, you can't compress it. So you got to get the nitrogen out. So it costs Shell about $65 a ton to clean that 60% purity stream up to the 95 or so percent they need to be able to move it in dense phase. in our project, we made a deal with Nutrien to capture the CO2 from the fertilizer plant, and it's 100% purity, but it's wet. So it still costs about $45 a ton to clean it up. And then we're on the right there, so we don't pay anything to clean it up because that's the way we made it. So the message here is make it in the right way, and then you don't have to spend the money to clean it up. And we just didn't conceive of it as being important before, so we made it in the cheapest way. But today, the cheapest way is no longer that. So that's the hydrogen plant, the gasifier we built there. We built a system down at the same time. So the refinery cost about $11 billion when we were finished. When we started off, we thought it was going to cost about 5.5. So, you know, that's not the greatest experience in my life either. But we got through it. We also decided we had to build this pipeline system because there was no pipe to move CO2 around. So we built this is about a 250-kilometer long pipe, and it is a 16-inch. I'll use units, English units, because I'm old. 16-inch pipe. It runs at about 2,600 psi, so it runs at injection pressure at the refinery. And we brought it down to an oil field we bought in Clive, which was we thought a good EOR prospect. And so we've got that all running now. It costs about 1.1 billion or so to build a pipe. And the oil field we put about 3 million tons of CO2 in it so far, so that's all working okay. That's what CO2 coming out of the ground. So it took me about 10 years to get from the time I dreamed it up to get the CO2 coming out of the pipe at the other end. So that was a good day. So this is stuff that's been done this is sort of the Canadian CO2 landscape. Green stuff is stuff I've either been an owner, a founder, or financier or something. So we think, you know, our little outfit with 4 people in has done, you know, 2/3 of the stuff that's been done in Canada. So we think that's okay for 4 guys. These are the new projects that have been announced. So these are all the pure sequestration projects. People have decided in the government that it isn't a good idea to do EOR anymore. We should just go to pure sequestration. So these are the projects that have been announced. This is back to refinery days. So when I was trying to do the refinery, I was up in a place called Refinery Row, and they were planning on building 9 refineries up there at the time. There's only 1 there today, so it's easy to announce stuff, and it's hard to get it done. So now I'll tell you what I'm doing now, because I've finished all that stuff. I'm on to the next one now. So we have something called hydrogen naturally, and what we're planning on doing is using wood fiber. So trees take CO2 out of the air, concentrate it, and make carbon in the tree. And we're going to take that carbon and gasify it and make it into hydrogen and sequester the CO2. So the hydrogen we get out of that preserves the carbon attributes of the tree in it. So essentially it's hugely carbon negative. It's not green, it's greener than green. And we got 2 of us working. So these are the 2 founding shareholders there. Peak is a renewable. Well, they're a forestry outfit, so they own tenure, they build forestry, you know, sawmills and pellets and all those kind of things. And so Peak knows everything about wood. We know everything about pipes. So that's an operation that Peak built. It's down in Alabama somewhere. And the guy who runs Peak is an amazing character. So he's like a millwright. He used to be a cocaine addict, and he eventually got out and recovered. He has built 18 of the 20 automated sawmills that have been built in North America in the last 20 years. And when you go in that building, they're making about 100 million board feet a year. Logs come in one end, and sorted, graded lumber comes out the other end. And the thing, there's 12 people working in the whole place. It's the most amazing. It's like being in a car factory. It's the most amazing place I've ever been. So anyway, that's what comes out. So why bother doing what we're doing? Lots of CO2. We got to, people, you know, are deciding now we got to take CO2 out of the atmosphere somehow. We put too much in. People don't think about what 400 parts per million is. That's 400 parts per million there. So, you know, looks like that's what it looks like when it gets mixed up. That's hard to get back out. And so people are thinking, well, I can build a machine to do that. That's what the machines look like that they're talking about. And the machine to take out 1 million tons a year, that's just a little bit less than we make at the refinery, 1 million tons a year. That machine ends up having the cross section of a 3-story apartment building, and it's 5 miles long. So that seems like a pretty tough machine to build to me. I don't think that, you know, I don't believe that story. So I have never seen a machine like that. So what we think is natural air capture has been working for 250 million years. We should take advantage of that. By the time the CO2 gets in the tree, it's 500,000 parts per million instead of 400. So we think that's a good starting place. Oh, sorry. Sorry. So that's what we're going to build. And essentially, when you harvest a forest in Canada for lumber, about half the forest goes to waste, maybe a little bit more. We are able to put a good part of that into pulp, but the pulp mills have been in financial distress. And so what's been happening is the Canadian pulp industry is essentially going out of business. And the reason for that is there's a lot better places to grow pulp trees than Canada because our trees grow slow and, we don't get the same harvesting efficiency. So the pulp business in Canada is in distress. We think we're a replacement. What we're doing is a replacement for the pulp business. So we make hydrogen in the thing and CO2. And so that's what the carbon intensity, these aren't our numbers. We hired a couple of consultants to do it. So we're way less than zero. We think we're about 150 negative carbon intensity. So that's what a plant looks like. We're trying to build the first phase of it. So we're trying to build it sort of within the green dots there. And we have the idea that you'll build these things more like we're trying to build it like a rooftop air conditioner, not like a refinery. So, it looks like a refinery. We're trying to standardize the process and make it more efficient and build the same thing over and over again. The first phase of it's going to cost about $2 billion to get done. So that's where we're going to build it up in the heartland, close to where we built the refinery. The reason for doing that is there's sequestration there, and there's also a good industrial hydrogen market. And so people talk a lot about the consumer market for hydrogen. I think that's a really long way off because hydrogen's really a dangerous thing to be handling. So those are the numbers. We think we can get, we build the whole thing, we'll be sequestering about 4 million tons a year of CO2 and producing 160,000 tons a year of hydrogen. In the heartland right now where we are, we use about 400,000 tons a year. So we think phase one will easily fit, and even the whole thing will fit in the fullness of time. So Canada really has a lot of this stuff. We think there's at least 100 million tons of this kind of material in Canada a year. And this is kind of value sort of equation that we're working from. So we think the worst place to sell fiber is into the pulp market. People have been putting it into the power market. So you can put wood into a converted coal plant or mix it with the coal. And the sort of dark green bar there is people have made pellets and shipped them to England, and that's higher value than what we would get just putting them in a plant here because of the CO2, because of the CO2 taxes there and the power prices. But we think actually the highest value is on the right because we can get into the low carbon fuel standard if we put the hydrogen in a refinery. So we have our own forest. So we by working with Dryan, we have about, I think, 600,000 cubic meters a year of tenure in Fort Nelson. There's about 2.5 million cubic meters there. So that the rest of it's owned by the Fort Nelson First Nation, and we're working in partnership with them. One of the ideas that I'd like to be able to deliver on in my life is to do something that is good for. It's on the path to reconciliation. I don't really know what that means, but what I think is if we can create durable, lasting, high-value jobs in places where they're needed, that's on the road to conciliation anyway. So that's part of this strategy here. Those are just some numbers on what's this, how much margin is available, and then you have to think I have to pay the conversion cost, but we think there's a lot more margin to pay our conversion costs than there would be if we made pulp. CO2, there's all kinds of different CO2 taxes, there's all kinds of different incentives, and so we think you can easily fit in the financial envelope that is existing. It doesn't have to have more drive than it already does. We can move the pellets about 1,700 kilometers and fit within the margin envelope we got, so we think building probably 4 of these plants in North America is sufficient to cover our plans anyway. That's a plan. We're trying to get 16 million tons a year out of the atmosphere by 2035. So that's the way the refinery looked when I started. So I did that. I can't see why I can't do this one. And we think it's good for the place. So that's what we're trying to do.
So next on the agenda is to introduce the judging panel. We really appreciated all of the judges for spending most of their weekend to review all of the submissions and score and grade and deliberate. So On our judging panel, we have Christina Edwards with Highwood Emissions, Jonathan Chong with Sensia, Agnieszka with Carbon Connect, Dawson Visham with SATE, Alan Fogwill with PTAC, Vita Martez with NSERC, Mark Taylor with Taylor Energy Advisors, and Albino Dominic with SATE. And here from the judging panel to let us know about the judges' deliberations is Christina Edwards. So please welcome Christina.
All right, so to start off, there's a huge thank you, I think, on the part of the judges for our organizing team. There was a lot of coaching. We come from various backgrounds. I know I don't have a lot of experience on the data science side. A number of the judges, I imagine, are a little bit newer in the emissions space. But it was really nice to have that coaching piece to help us along in how we can make some good decisions and really give the recognition to all of the hard work that the teams have put in. So on the quantitative side, there was a lot that went into actually taking all of the machine learning tools that the teams have put together and turning that into, you know, what is the scoring of the results that came out. But we're kind of looking at that qualitative side of things. So the first piece of that would really be the work the teams did in kind of looking at investigating and understanding the data. So here they're given a series of satellite images of all of these methane emission measurements from a variety of sources. And one of the things that Dylan and I can attest to learning early on from Louis Matar in our careers is different ways of looking at the data can start to reveal different things you may not have seen from it originally. So just pulling out some visuals and showing that each of these teams really put in the effort to kind of investigate and explore what that data was kind of telling them as a starting point. The next piece of that, and the piece I think that was most interesting for me, not having a lot of experience on this machine learning side, was what you really have to do in manipulating, augmenting, testing out how you can train these algorithms in trying to give you results. And so I found it really interesting, not only in what the teams were testing out and likely what they've learned from a lot of these boot camps, but just really the helpfulness in which they're explaining these concepts so that we can see that process that's happened. The last piece, of course, of that would really be showing us the results they had. So everyone's going to take a slightly different approach, feed in that data, and really starting to look at, you know, the outcomes they were seeing from it, and also really that recognition in the difficulty and a lot of the variability of the data they have. So this isn't kind of your basic math. And the machine tells you that, you know, 8 + 4 is 12. There was a lot of variability. And to me, I think the biggest piece was really bringing that back to what was the value of this? Why do we care about looking at that data? And so then I found there was a good amount of kind of research and explanation in how does this methane emission data fit into the big picture of what people are doing in estimating and trying to quantify, you know, as operators, what they're actually contributing to emissions or how they can start to look at reducing that. And some really nice ideas and suggestions as well from the teams of specific cases, not just kind of this general concept of we saw a big number and we tried to make it smaller, but some really nice investigations into how they can specifically look at various facility types or pieces of equipment or reasons why emissions might be the way they were. So I really appreciate all of the effort the teams put in these really fantastic presentations so that they could talk us through the story of not only what they did, but why they were doing it.
It's kind of weird being in person. You know, you only saw a face online probably, and I know many of you interacted with me on Slack, and I tried to do my best, kind of providing the participants some guidance, some advice as a process engineer as well on methane emissions. I'm very happy to see everybody in person. I was part of the Datathon as well 2 years ago, but that was all online during COVID times. Interesting story. I was in Australia at the time and I had nothing else better to do because I got bored of the beaches. So I decided to join the Datathon there, obviously. But I'll talk a little about the final scoring. And when I was chatting with a lot of you, I said, usually the quantitative and the qualitative would correlate with each other in terms of how well you would have done. The organizers got together yesterday. We collected all of the judges' scores. Some even trickled in this morning, so we had to add them kind of last minute. And the results were very interesting. I think obviously we weighted the qualitative for 80% of your score, and then 20% was the quantitative. But it ended up being very interesting because those who did well with the quantitative scoring at the very end did pull up their marks and were able to kind of balance out their overall score to be a little bit better. I will talk a little bit about the Kaggle struggles, as you have all witnessed, and I invoked Rule 8, I believe. I think everybody was very familiar with Rule 8, me changing the rules halfway through the game, but we did have a lot of challenges there, and I am very appreciative of all the participants who not only guided me because I had to step in last minute, but being patient with me in terms of making sure the Kaggle operated correctly, ensuring that you kind of understood what the rules were, ensuring that you kind of knew what the background knowledge was. I know it wasn't easy for the participants, so I would appreciate that that patience there. And, if you have any questions about the quantitative score, you can talk to me afterwards. But I believe based on how I've set the deadline, you should be able to see that private leaderboard now as to how well you actually did. It was meant to be hard, but obviously some of you were able to figure out what that test data was at the end of the day. It was very difficult for us because it was open source at the end of the day. So it wasn't, impossible for you to figure out what that test data was. There were some questions around, the ground truth. What were we actually looking for? I understand, methane emissions, even when we're trying to predict or understand what that quantitative side is not completely accurate. I think, given what we were given for the open source, I think, you were up to the challenge, and you had presented us with very, well presented case studies on what you thought, could improve in the industry, what you thought could be, a path forward for things like that. So that's just kind of a little bit of an insight, a high level overview of what the organizers and the judges talked about yesterday night. I could have been in Victoria right now doing my lawn bowling, chilling on a Tofino, but I'm very happy to be here. When we were doing our Datathon 2 years ago, it was all online. We didn't get any of this. It's probably you sitting in somebody's basement or in your PJs in your kitchen, just accepting your award. But this is definitely a change, and I'm very happy to be part of. So just like, because it's Oscar season, I'm going to be presenting the top awards now, and it was very interesting. So I think I press this button and I go here. So third place, I guess the Grammy maybe, but the Grammy goes to two different teams. It was so close that the organizers yesterday decided that there would be two teams who would be getting third place. So those two are tied. That's not the team, but Insights Inc. and CDC. So congratulations for third place, and good job. Second place, the Golden Globe, I guess, the award. I don't actually know if it pops up now, but congratulations to Above Methane Emissions. And finally, the moment we've all been waiting for. This is the Oscar, and what will happen is we'll play their winning clip as well, and then we'll ask the winning team to come up and perhaps say a few words. There won't be an orchestra to play you off, so don't worry about that part. But this particular team, I think their quantitative did help them kind of propel them to the first place. So that goes to JamG. Congratulations.
Hello everyone, we are GMG team, and today we are presenting our results for the 2023 SPE Datathon, Zeroing Methane Emissions. Methane is a powerful climate pollutant that is emitted intentionally or unintentionally during oil and gas production and processing, power generation, waste management, and other human activities. It can be estimated that methane is approximately 28 times more harmful than carbon dioxide to climate change. And so, methane measurement and mitigation has received significant attention in recent years due to its large impact in climate change in both the short term and long term. And so, mitigating these emissions in reaching worldwide net zero targets are very important. In this challenge, we were given two sets of satellite imagery from the Global Airborne Observatory and NASA's Next Gen Airborne Visible RI Spectrum. The objective was to identify methane plumes from the images and determine the emission sources based on a series of attributes set. On our journey, we started by taking a look at the Permian Basin and other sources from the US, and this resulted in about 6,000 images collected containing plume data. We then cleaned and augmented this data by layering sector information for feature engineering. This was then passed through our ML model, which classified the emissions, and we used a UNET model to quantify bottom-up estimations. With that, we can consolidate the top-down and bottom-up and create a marginal abatement cost analysis, or a MAC chart. To gain insight from this data, we needed to quantify it, and once emissions were quantified and source types identified, a closer look at the emissions could be made. Looking at this, we decided that there are different sectors. There is the animal, coal, oil, and natural gas, power plants, and waste sectors. Looking at this data allowed us to identify where the significant information is located. For example, oil and natural gas sector has high variability, and there are many facilities to look at, as well as other typical facilities like waste, where there's only a couple, but mitigation options are out there. These significant agents were identified on the map, here in the Permian side and on the waste side. Further analysis of the data showed us that there are superemitters. A small number of sources contribute to the majority of the emissions. A significant portion of these sources are in the oil and gas database. In order to mitigate these emissions, top-down and bottom-up must be reconciled. Opportunities are there. If the reported vented gas in the Permian dataset is recovered instead of being flared, about $400 million per year of extra revenue can be acquired, assuming a natural gas price of $2 per million BTU. However, there are challenges with this. Satellite survey consistently find higher emissions than the reported, and reconciling top-down and bottom-up is crucial for understanding the actual volumes of sources. Mitigation solutions are implemented in the ground. Therefore, an accurate bottom-up model is essential, and so we need to create this for mitigating emissions. Looking at a typical bottom-up, we can take Alberta for example, as we expect this distribution of emissions to be representative in other countries as well, with a large chunk of it being pneumatics, tank venting, fugitive, and other emissions. For these emission sources, there are mitigation solutions available. For pneumatics, for example, there are high bleed to low bleed conversions as well as compressed air installations. These emissions all have mitigation technologies that can be applied. So let's take a look at a good example from our dataset. In this one, the top-down estimates about 100 kilograms per hour of methane emission, where our bottom-up estimation done through engineering knowledge of equipment and emission sources estimated about 60 kilograms per hour. Why are these so close? Well, there's a good inventory of the equipment as well as up-to-date process information on this facility. And so exactly what kind of emissions are being created in this facility can be calculated. And for this, we can create a roadmap of how these emissions can be mitigated. Here, I'm showing that marginal abatement cost curve, or the MAC chart. And essentially, we can tell exactly how much we can mitigate and what it's going to cost you. This can be friendly for different vendors and operators as they can see exactly what their specific equipment are needed and what needs to be done for their emissions specifically. You can do a similar type of analysis for different sectors. Here we have a landfill with a top-down estimate of about 4,000 kilograms per hour. For the bottom-up, different types of information is needed, like the area, the type of the facility, the waste, and facility-specific information, like dry sewage, slug, and dirt using to cover this waste. When we do a bottom-up estimation, we use IPCC methods, and they use an average value. But as you can see, our estimated values are about 10 times lower than the aerial survey. This could be attributed to the fact that perhaps estimations and averages are not useful for different facilities, as you can see for this one. Considering that we were 10 times off, steps need to be taken in order to reconcile the two. And this involves engaging the stakeholders, operators, and regulators, gathering that information so that it can be analyzed for the facility. Only then can mitigation options be assessed, implemented, and monitored. For example, we thought that geomembranes might be a good alternative to the dry sludge that they were using in their current site, but that can only be truly assessed once you have reconciled the bottom-up and top-down estimations. There are a couple of learnings that we can take from this study. One of them is that reconciling the satellite imagery and bottom-up estimation is critical for mitigation efforts. Understanding the source and rate leads to a reliable roadmap for these emissions mitigations. Engagement is essential. We are measuring and identifying the sources, but we need to engage and have site-specific data so that we can assess mitigation options, implement them, and monitor them, so that we can have a cleaner future. Thank you for listening to our presentation.